Happy Monday, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller, and thank you for tuning into Your Alaska Weather, brought to you by NOAA and the National Weather Service. Tonight, September 24th, 2018, quite a big pattern change for late September, so let's talk about that here. As always, if you need to get in touch with us, 1-800-472-0391. That'll put you in touch with the automated line, and you can get in touch with the forecaster at Juneau, Fairbanks, or the Anchorage office. If you want to use the website, weather.gov/Alaska, and then just continue to use the point and click feature, dialing in as close as you like for your specific area. And for email, tvweather@noaa.gov, and Mr. Snider or Mr. Percy will get back in touch with you regarding questions and comments. So for our headlines tonight, we have a dynamic area of low pressure that's been pushing through the area. It's brought some thunderstorms this afternoon and still continuing to bring some gusty winds. Some wind advisories have been hoisted by the Fairbanks office, and so we'll talk about those a little bit more in depth. Heavy rain going to be moving back into southeast Alaska. It's been pretty dry there for most of the month, but we'll see a more fall-like pattern set up and bringing some continuous rainfall to that area. And then high pressure is going to start to reestablish itself for the middle of the week, but it should be fairly short-lived with more active weather on the way for the end of the week. So let's start out with our hazards, and as you can see here, a suite of wind advisories, mainly across the Alaska Range and up into the 40-mile country there near the Chino River Valley. And so with that, we do have gusts to 60 miles per hour through these passes and gusts to about 45 miles an hour up here along the Alaska Highway west of Tok primarily. And so these advisories, with the system moving from south to north, it can expire at 7 a.m. for the western one, at 10 a.m. on Tuesday for the eastern side there of the Alaska Range, and then at noon on Tuesday for the 40-mile country. So be advised if you're traveling through those areas, some gusty winds could affect the higher profile vehicles. And now let's look at our satellite image. Here you can see that dynamic area of low pressure pushing right through south central Alaska. That's what helped to really kick off those thunderstorms. Some dry air moved in behind it and really caused some instability and some lift throughout much of south central Alaska. And so with that, we saw some fairly active convection, some small hail reported, and definitely some gusty winds associated with this system. Those winds continue up near Northway and along the Alaska Highway near Tok again. And then on the backside, we just see some colder air wrapping in, helping to create some showers across southwest Alaska. Let's take a look at that again here. You can see those showers spinning around this counterclockwise, pretty large area of low pressure. Really, for southeast Alaska, the key is this moisture here. This fetch of moisture is pretty long, going all the way back down towards Hawaii, and so that's really what's going to help to bring some of that more moderate to heavy rain back to southeast Alaska. Let me show you that now in the visible loop, and you can see even on visible, it looks like a fairly impressive swath of moisture. Across much of the Bering, looks pretty quiet here on visible. There are some lower clouds and some stratus out there. And then along the Arctic coastline here, we do have plenty of stratus once again and expecting some fog to develop. We do have a few isolated snow showers just east of Utqiagvik, but for the most part, pretty quiet weather along the slope. And let's see that one more time there. There's the moisture coming in and really the dominant area of low pressure with high pressure starting to reestablish out over the Bering. So how does that look on our surface map? Well, there you can see those pockets of thunderstorms across much of south central Alaska, sliding off towards the Hatcher Pass area now, but those should be dissipating as we get into the cooler overnight hours. Along this system here, primarily showers in southwest Alaska. It's along the Alaska Range there that we have a little bit more steady rain, and again towards the Susitna Valley where that southwest flow coming up behind this low really favors lifting along the mountains, and so that's where you get that more steady precipitation. Towards southeast Alaska, we have that heavier rain moving in associated with this warm front system. So lots of warm, moist air, and you can see how it's kind of lined up all the way along here. This cold front's going to fall apart, and we'll really see this area of precipitation continue to slide towards southeast Alaska. So again, expect that to really take over. Just some light showers now down by Hoonah and Klawock, but those should really increase as we go into the next couple days. Out over the Arctic coastline, pretty quiet weather up there, just that patchy freezing fog and maybe an isolated snow shower or two, and then high pressure helping to bring some colder air back out over the Bering, which means this time of year you get some showers as you have those cold air advection showers developing over the warmer waters. So for tonight, not a whole lot of activity still expected to continue, except for southeast Alaska, where we do expect that rain to intensify, and that'll be just because weak low pressure and plenty of moisture just ride up along that boundary and over the terrain. So that's where we expect a fairly narrow swath of precipitation, but it will be heavy at times, so be advised that it could start to pile up in a hurry. Out over south central Alaska, things will be pretty quiet with just some spotty showers after that system moves through. Definitely starting to see the snow levels come down to about 4,000 feet in the Alaska range, maybe a little bit lower in some of those heavier showers, down to about 3,000 feet for parts of the Chugach, but don't expect a widespread low elevation snow or anything of that nature. This boundary is kind of keeping the colder air up north of the Alaska range and the warmer air and the moisture to the south, and so that's where we see kind of the delineation between the snow and rain mix and more of just a steady rain. Up along the Alaska range, or excuse me, along the Brooks Range and the North Slope for tonight, we do expect those freezing fog conditions to redevelop and intensify. Low visibility is up there again, and then we do have some chance for some light snow. The winds will continue through the area where we have those wind advisories. As we look towards the western portion of the state, just some light light rain showers, and not really expecting much in the way of winds as high pressure slowly nudges in there. For Tuesday, southeast Alaska, that's really going to be the story, is just more of the same warm rain coming up, just having a large fetch of moisture coming down from the North Pacific. And so that's where you see the heaviest rain is going to be centered right there north of the Dixon Entrance region, and going to be fairly continuous for much of you in southeast Alaska. For south central, you can expect pretty quiet conditions, just some isolated rain and snow showers, snow confined to the higher elevations, of course, but rain showers over the Copper River Basin and possibly the Prince William Sound. Otherwise, starting to see things clear out for southwest Alaska and improving conditions as this area of high pressure, not really on the map a whole bunch, but this ridge of high pressure is starting to help to bring some northwest flow into the southern mainland and help to dry things out a little bit after that dynamic low. Up towards the interior portion of the state, just some more showers, snow at higher elevations, but showers continuing, and then those freezing fog conditions along the Brooks Range and the Arctic coastline. Our next system is already queued up way out to the west, but that's where we really expect it to stay, just bringing light rain to much of the western Aleutians. And then how about for Wednesday? Well, there's that system, once again, bringing that rain to the western and central Aleutians down to 992. So a fairly impressive system with some wraparound showers on the backside, but don't really expect it to make much more eastward progress, at least through the middle of the week, as this area of high pressure starts to take control, like we talked about there in the first few slides. As we look down towards the southern portion of the zones and northern portion of the Gulf, that's where that area of precipitation continues to move from west to east towards southeast Alaska. So while the one warm front starts to dissipate, the next area of low pressure starts to intensify and more moisture on the way for southeast Alaska. Some light rain showers still, just with that lingering moisture over the eastern portion of the interior, but otherwise high pressure at 1,031 millibars is really going to be the story. How about for our temperatures? Well, for Tuesday morning, you can expect your temperatures over southeast Alaska to be fairly mild because of that cloud cover and that widespread precipitation. You can expect temperatures in the upper 40s to low 50s for much of southeast Alaska, maybe a little bit cooler up there by Skagway, down into the mid 40s. Once we get over towards the Copper River Basin with mostly cloudy conditions all the way across much of southern Alaska, don't expect a large disparity in temperatures tonight and into tomorrow morning, with lows primarily in the low 40s for the Copper River Basin, climbing up into the mid, maybe upper 40s as you get towards Kodiak Island. Out over southwest Alaska, expect the lows in the low to mid 40s, and then just a few cool spots here in the Susitna Valley, Alaska Range in the upper 30s. Up along the interior, expect temperatures in the upper 30s to low 40s for your overnight lows tonight into Tuesday, and then it's finally when we get north of the Brooks Range where we have that fog and the more ability to radiate, we'll see temperatures drop into the upper 20s and some low 30s there along the northwest portion of the state. Expect your lows in the mid 40s for much of the Aleutian chain. As we get into Tuesday afternoon's highs, temperatures should be a pretty steady state across southeast Alaska with that moisture, keeping things pretty cool in mid 50s to upper 50s. Across south central Alaska, starting to see some sunshine work its way in, helping things approach 60-degree mark, but it's going to be a struggle with the cloud cover over the Copper River Basin and southwest Alaska, keeping things in the 50s. Towards the interior portion of the state, generally right around 50, and then up along the Arctic coastline there in the low to mid 30s. For Wednesday morning, expect temperatures near 50 for southeast Alaska. It's going to be right around the freezing mark for much of the Copper River Basin, and then near 40 for southwest Alaska, and upper 20s for the northern portion of the state. And then finally on Wednesday afternoon, expect temperatures to rebound pretty nicely with some sunshine.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, up to your flying weather now, and starting out across the Bering Sea here. Our next system is starting to approach the area by Tuesday morning, and so thus bringing in some more IFR conditions. Southerly flow keeping IFR conditions along the central Aleutians and across parts of the AKPen as well. And then plenty of IFR conditions surrounded by a wide swath of MVFR conditions across mainland Alaska. And this is all due to that moisture just continuing to pump up into the state and high pressure starting to build in. So foggy conditions expected, especially out over western Alaska, low stratus, and then those conditions will persist all the way up through much of the mainland, especially during the morning hours. For southeast Alaska, you guys can expect IFR conditions to start much of your day across the area and MVFR conditions along the northern portion of the coast. As we go through the day, some improvement there along the northern portions of the coast, but still some IFR conditions with plenty of moisture pushing in, helping to keep those ceilings and those visibilities down. Across mainland Alaska, some improvement by Tuesday afternoon as we see those lower ceilings and visibilities lift a little bit into the MVFR area. And then as we look out over the Bering Sea, you can still see plenty of IFR surrounded by MVFR conditions by Tuesday afternoon. We'll see a repeat of that by Wednesday morning, some more IFR conditions as fog settles back in along the Brooks Range and north of the Alaska Range. Some spotty IFR conditions along the Copper River Basin and out towards the Seward Peninsula, but otherwise widespread MVFR with plenty of moisture. Really the only spots avoiding it are Bristol Bay and south central Cook Inlet areas. As we look out towards the west, still more IFR conditions surrounded by MVFR. And then along southeast Alaska, continued IFR conditions for you all there. Not a great start to the week for aviation. As we get into Wednesday afternoon, though, start to see some improvement as high pressure starts to push some drier air in there. So IFR conditions sliding to the southeast, starting to see those areas open up to VFR across much of mainland, south central mainland and southwest mainland. Still IFR along the southern side of the Alaska Peninsula and plenty of IFR out over the western Aleutians, and then just MVFR conditions across the Alaska Range and up towards the Arctic coast. So how does that look for our passes? Well, you're going to notice a trend here. Anaktuvik IFR in the morning, improving MVFR in the afternoon. Again, instrument flight rules, not fright rules, improving to marginal visual flight rules. Lake Clark and Merrill, same story there. Rainy instrument flight rules improving to marginal visual flight rules. Same story at Windy. And then Isabel will be MVFR throughout the day, as well as Mentasta MVFR to start the day, improving to VFR later on. Tanita MVFR through the day, and Portage will be MVFR through the day as well. Chilkoot and White, as we looked at there, will be IFR throughout the day. How about those freezing levels? Well, you can see we are starting to see signs of fall. Surface freezing level out here over the Copper River Basin along the Alcan border, and then the surface line just south of the Brooks Range here up over the northern portion of the state. Still some warm air, though, across much of the Gulf and southeastern Gulf. Freezing levels all the way up to 12,000 feet to here. And then as we look out towards the west coast, down to about 4,000 feet, with generally 4,000 feet stretching across the Bering Sea. And as we get into our icing maps, you can see plenty of icing with all that moisture, primarily widespread, isolated, moderate across the state, generally between above 6,000, above 8,000 as you get a little bit further south with those high freezing levels. And then just where those upslope conditions are along the Brooks Range and the Alaska Range, expect a little bit more considerable moderate. Jet stream looks like this. We've got it coming in at about 125 knots west-east, and then diving down in support of this ridge at about 135 knots, this area of high pressure. But continuing on to from west to east across much of the Aleutians, small finger there coming over top of that area of low pressure. And really the big story is this area of high pressure helping to keep that moisture continuing to pump up into our area, especially southeast Alaska, all the way up to 130 knots. Otherwise, pretty quiet as far as jet activity across the mainland. How does that look in our 9,000 foot winds? Not quite down to the surface yet. But you can see here along the Arctic coast, east to west flow at about 15 knots. And then it turns around from southwest to northeast, 20 to 35 knots across much of the southern mainland. As we look towards down towards the Bering and out towards the Aleutians, here's that area of high pressure, and that continues to bring what is southwest at about 25 and then turns back to a northeast flow. The biggest area of contraction or confliction with the winds is right here along the Gulf of Alaska, 30 knots out of the northeast becoming 50 knots out of the southwest, and that carries on into southeast Alaska. So we'll be keying in on that area. You can see it here at 3,000 feet as well, and you'll notice that sharp turn in the winds will be reflected in our turbulence map. As you see here over the most of the state, westerly, southwesterly flow at about 25 knots, and along the Arctic coastline about 15 knots out of the east. So there's our turbulence. You can see below 10,000 feet, that area starting to creep up into the considerable moderate range, and then below 8,000 feet, just mostly isolated moderate. We'll be back.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, well, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now I'm old enough in the weather satellite business
You can
that
remember
with
when.
the new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition. Right. Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago. No. It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellites is launched, see, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect. Yes. And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care? Okay. You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin? It sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah. You know what, though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey, but they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job, and it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Absolutely does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite. But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image, thanks to the processing techniques Yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and more. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now into your sea ice and your marine forecast for Monday, September 24th. You can see here our sea ice analysis from expert Mary Beth Schreck. She has indicated there's been some growth along this portion of the sea ice pack, and then the larger pack ice is also seeing some growth on the southern extent here. And we expect that to continue through much of the week as winds remain light, temperatures, as we saw on the temperature maps, remain below freezing. So we expect the growth to continue until the weekend, when some more dynamic weather could bring a shift in the ice and help to break up some of that new growth. And on into southeast Alaska's marine forecast for Tuesday. For Lynn Canal, expect southerly winds 25 knots and seas 4 feet. Expect those winds to ramp up tonight, but they should be coming down tomorrow. So we do have gale force winds in the forecast tonight, but then small craft advisory will level winds for Tuesday. Across the southern portion of the inner waterways, southeast winds 15 to 25 knots on a 3 to 4 foot sea. Out over the open waters of the Gulf, expect a little bit more variable, light winds 10 knots and seas about 9 feet. And then towards the southern portion of the Gulf, a southwest wind becoming an east wind at about 20 knots and 8 to 10 foot seas. As we look towards Wednesday now for southeast Alaska, expect the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage area to become north at 15 knots and seas 3 feet. And then down towards the Dixon Entrance, south winds 15 knots and seas about 3 feet. Towards the southern portion of the Gulf, expect 20 to 25 knots out of the west-southwest, and seas are going to be up about 11 feet. And then towards the northern portion of the Gulf, expect kind of a variable wind east becoming north, 10 to 20 knots, and seas 7 to 10 feet. For south central Alaska, well, it's a very variable flow across the area. We've got just about every direction you could imagine. So southwest winds here along the barrier jet area south of the Prince William Sound, but then becoming 10 knots out of the south for Prince William Sound at seas at 2 feet. Strong, small southerly winds at 25 knots, small craft level, and seas 7 feet for the northern portion of the Cook Inlet, and then southwest becoming northeast for the southern portion of the Cook Inlet and near the Barren Islands, 15 to 20 knots, and seas dropping to about 3 to 6 feet. And then how about for Wednesday? South central, most of the winds will go offshore for the Gulf and even for Prince William Sound. Just some northeast winds there along the Cook Inlet. Generally between 10 and 15 knots, and seas for the protected areas 2 to 3 feet, rising up to about 7 feet on Wednesday across the northern portion of the Gulf. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, expect a light wind 10 knots out of the south and southwest, and seas 3 to 5 feet north of the peninsula. But then on the south side, Shelikof will be out of the west, 15 knots, and seas 3 feet, whereas the Kodiak Island and down towards Perryville expect a northeast wind, 15 to 20 knots, and seas 6 feet. On into Wednesday now, expect generally the whole area to go northeasterly as that high pressure starts to build in. Going to be 10 to 20 knots north of the peninsula at 2 to 4 feet, but then 20 to 30 knots south of the peninsula, and seas building with that northeast flow from 5 up to 12 foot down south of Sand Point. For the Aleutian chain, generally a northerly wind, fairly light 10 to 20 knots across the area with seas only 4 to 5 feet, except along this front where we see southerly winds up to gale force 35 knots out there and seas building all the way up to 8 feet. So be advised if you're traveling out that far that there could be some gusty gale force winds, and that front slowly works eastward, bringing more southerly winds at gale force 12 to 14 foot seas. Out towards the rest of the Aleutian chain, generally an east to southeast wind, 15 to 25 knots, and seas climbing a little bit up from the 4 to the 11-foot range. Along the west coast, you can expect near the Kuskokwim Bay west winds at about 15 knots and seas 3 feet. Otherwise, generally a northwest and westerly wind, 15 to 20 knots, and seas between 4 and 5 feet. A little bit more variable here on Wednesday, except out by the approaching front where we see the southeast winds 35 knots and 14 feet seas. Otherwise, generally 10 to 20 knots, variable conditions, and seas between 2 and 3 feet. Now for the Arctic coast on Tuesday, northeast winds up near Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, 20 knots, 4-foot seas. But as we get towards the northwest coast, a little bit more variable as it starts to switch down by the Seward Peninsula, 15 to 25 knots and seas 3 to 7 feet. And then on into Wednesday, expect westerly winds along the Arctic coast, 10 to 15 knots, seas pretty calm at 2 to 3 feet. And then east becoming west, and then southerly winds, just about every direction you can imagine, 15 to 20 knots and seas 3 to 4 feet. So let's recap tonight's weather. We have that moisture pumping up into southeast Alaska, going to keep things very wet there for the next couple days. We see the showers and the thunderstorms start to break up tonight across South Central, but we still have those wind advisories in effect until Tuesday morning through the Alaska Range and parts of 40-mile country. As we get into Tuesday, more wet weather for southeast Alaska as things continue to break up. So even some sun for southwest Alaska. Fog will remain over the Arctic coast. And then on to Wednesday, wet weather continues while we dry things out over the mainland. Well, thanks for joining us this evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.